You know, that's a tricky subject right there. You know, you can stand on business about certain shit, and you not really standing on business at the end of the day, because again, a lot of things you don't have, you know, a big hand on the steering wheel. You know,
So whose hand is on the steering wheel?
my conscience.
Your conscience
My
has a hand on the steering wheel.
uh-huh.
Okay. When you say your conscience, what does that mean, your conscience? Okay.
When Ace sat down with Speedy for what would become Love Island's most revealing interview, nobody expected him to accidentally expose the entire production machine behind the show. But that's exactly what happened when he started talking about his conscience making decisions for him in the villa. What he revealed about producer manipulation, fake friendships, and the real reason Jeremiah got eliminated will make you question everything you thought you knew about reality TV. But here's what gets really messy. The man who spent the entire season preaching about standing on business just admitted he barely stood on anything at all. And wait until you hear what he said about Nick that basically ended their friendship over something that might not have even been Nick's fault to begin with. If you want the real tea about what actually went down in that villa, make sure you subscribe, because this channel is all about getting you the unfiltered truth that the official reunions won't touch. And trust me, after you hear what Ace revealed about those elimination deliberations, you'll understand why they keep the cameras rolling for over an hour when we only see 2 minutes. Ace spent his entire Love Island run positioning himself as the villa's moral compass. The man who set boundaries with Amaya, called out Austin for being fake, and supposedly stood on business no matter what. But in this interview, something fascinating happens when Speedy starts pressing him about his voting decisions. Suddenly, Ace starts talking about his conscience making choices for him. Not his heart, not his gut, but his conscience. And when Speedy asks what that means, Ace gets cagey and says his conscience has control of the steering wheel. Then comes the kicker. When asked if other people had consciences too, Ace confirms that everybody in the villa had consciences, including everyone on the production team. Wait, hold up. Let me break down what just happened here, because this is where the interview gets really interesting. Ace is essentially telling us that production had input on major villa decisions, but he can't say it directly because of those lovely NDAs everyone signs. So instead, he's using conscience as code for producer influence. But here's my hot take. If you're going to spend an entire season bragging about being authentic and standing on business, you can't then turn around and blame your controversial decisions on outside pressure. Either you stood firm on your principles or you didn't. You can't have it both ways. Let me know in the comments what you think about this conscience situation, because it raises serious questions about how much of what we watched was actually real versus orchestrated drama. One of the most criticized moments of Ace's villa run was voting to eliminate Jeremiah instead of Austin, who clearly had zero romantic connections at the time. Viewers were rightfully confused because it seems like obvious jealousy or strategic game playing. But this interview reveals something much more complex. Ace admits that watching it back, the elimination felt like some hater stuff and that he felt bad about it.
When I was watching it in real time, I was like, damn, this is some hating shit. Like,
Yeah,
they trying to
nah.
get Jeremiah out the paint because he got
I
motion.
felt like a hater, and I even said that, and was like, look, this feels like some hating ass shit, like respectfully. Like, yeah, it's television.
But then he drops this bombshell. He says the reunion didn't show the full deliberation where they went through the pros and cons of every person up for elimination. According to Ace, they started the clip mid-conversation to make it look like he immediately suggested sending Jeremiah home.
I had said this is not the full clip. You guys are starting this clip at, oh, I think we should send Jeremiah home. We went through the pros and cons of every person, all of us. After doing all of those things, then they started the clip of, I think we should take Jeremiah home. So it sucks that the full picture didn't get painted right then and there, because again, the reunion is supposed to clear things up. When things aren't being cleared up, that makes me feel some type of way.
Here's what gets interesting though. Ace also mentions that Taylor came to him saying Jeremiah was repeating the same cycle with new bombshell Andrina. And when pressed about whether Taylor wanted to get to know Andrina himself, Ace confirms that Taylor was overly interested in her. So let me connect some dots here. Taylor potentially wanted Jeremiah out of the picture so he could pursue Andrina without competition. But Taylor couldn't be the one to suggest it because that would look obvious. Enter Ace, who allegedly had influences guiding his decision-making process. The real tea is that this elimination might have been about removing competition for the new girl, not about any genuine concerns about Jeremiah's villa behavior. And if that's true, it makes the whole situation even messier, Because Jeremiah got sent home as collateral damage in someone else's strategy. What do you think happened here? Drop your theories in the comments, because this elimination is looking more strategic than anyone originally thought. Perhaps the most revealing part of this entire interview is how Ace's post-Villa friendships completely reshuffled. Nick, who was arguably his closest ally in the Villa, is now essentially persona non grata in Ace's inner circle. Meanwhile, Jeremiah, the guy he helped eliminate, is back in his good graces, and they're planning to hang out and stream together.
Understood where we were both coming from, and actually me and Jeremiah are super cool, and I hope to do a stream with him. We were just talking about it last night, like, yo, we gonna do some shit, or we can go hoop, we can go do whatever. Like, we super cool now to where we can understand where we're coming from, but...
The reason for Nick's fall from grace? Ace felt that Nick didn't defend him publicly against negative narratives after the show aired. When Ace confronted Nick about this, Nick apparently said he was pretty much over it.
But when it comes to the serious shit regarding my character, that's the things I take serious.
And you feel like he didn't stand up for you and or silence narratives when he had the opportunity
and I told him that, yo, I feel like the answer that you gave was just mad PR, and I didn't respect it. He was like, well, I'm pretty much over it. So I was like, okay, cool.
He said, I'm pretty much over it?
Yeah, I'm pretty much over the whole thing.
Which Ace took as dismissive of his concerns. But here's where I need to call out some problematic thinking. Ace admits he doesn't spend much time on social media, yet he expects his friends to monitor and combat every negative narrative about him online. That's not how friendship works, and it's definitely not Nick's job to be Ace's public relations manager. More importantly, am I missing something? Was Nick even given opportunities to defend Ace? When I think about the interviews and content I've seen from other Islanders, most of them are asked pretty standard questions about their own experiences, not specifically about defending other contestants. So Ace might be holding Nick responsible for something that was never really Nick's responsibility to begin with. This whole situation reveals something uncomfortable about how Ace views loyalty. It seems less about genuine friendship and more about public perception management. Real friends support each other privately and when asked, but expecting someone to proactively fight your battles on social media feels transactional rather than authentic. Tell me in the comments if you think Ace is being fair to Nick here, because this friendship fallout seems based on unrealistic expectations. Throughout this interview, Ace keeps hinting at producer manipulation without ever stating it directly. He talks about influences affecting elimination decisions, mentions that deliberations last much longer than what we see, and suggests that the steering wheel of many Villa decisions wasn't in the contestants' hands. But here's what's fascinating. The way Ace navigates these topics feels incredibly calculated, like every word was carefully chosen. The repeated use of conscience instead of just saying producers told us what to do suggests he definitely consulted with lawyers beforehand about exactly how much he could reveal without violating his NDA.
How many of the decisions are led by your conscience as opposed to by Ace?
A lot of decisions. I feel like about majority of every time an Islander is being sent home or being voted off.
Did other people have a conscience in the Villa?
Oh, a whole lot of people had a conscience in the Villa. I feel like everybody got consciences in the Villa. And it gets tough because, you know, influences try and persuade you out of how you are feeling to, you know, try and cater to certain things and certain people and certain things like that. But
is what we see, that deliberation, is that how it happens?
Right then and there, no. That's not how it happens. But
okay.
Again, yeah.
You can almost see the legal briefing happening. You can hint at outside influence, but don't explicitly name production staff. You can suggest decisions weren't entirely your own, but don't detail specific conversations with producers. It's the reality TV equivalent of organized crime testimony, where everything important gets said in code. This aligns with what we know about reality TV production. Shows like Love Island have story producers whose job is to create compelling narratives, and that sometimes means encouraging certain decisions or conversations. But what's interesting is how different contestants handle this pressure. Some Islanders seem to go along with production suggestions more readily, while others push back. Based on Ace's interview, it sounds like he fell into the first category more often than he'd like to admit. The question becomes, if you know you're being influenced to make decisions that don't align with your actual feelings, why go along with it? Ace's answer seems to be that the pressure was significant and that everyone faced it. But that brings us back to the central contradiction of his entire narrative. You can't be the authentic truth teller who stands on business while simultaneously admitting you made decisions based on external pressure rather than your own judgment. Here's my take. I think Ace got caught up in wanting to be seen as a strategic player, and went along with production suggestions that he later regretted. But instead of owning that, he's trying to have it both ways by claiming authenticity while blaming outside forces for his controversial moves. One of the most complex dynamics Ace discusses is his relationship with Huda, both in the villa and after. He admits that in the first few days, he was exploring a connection with her, but by day 4 or 5, he'd made it clear that it wasn't going to be romantic. Yet Huda continued to push the narrative that there was something there. The infamous heart rate challenge incident gets dissected in detail, with Ace admitting he was uncomfortable with how far things went, but also acknowledging that he was smacking basketballs and clearly engaged in the moment.
One thing I will challenge you on.
Yeah.
You said you felt uncomfortable
Yeah.
during. You looked into.
I looked into it,
You
and,
was grabbing
and don't
it,
get me
you
wrong,
was
I was
smacking
smacking the
ass.
bounce of the basketballs and shit.
You
I
looked
understood.
into it to me.
And I completely get that.
He tries to frame it as just going along with the challenge format, but the extended footage shown at the reunion tells a different story. What's most telling is Ace's current relationship with Huda. They don't have one. He says there are things about her behavior and demeanor that he doesn't respect, but he won't get specific. This feels like someone who got caught up in villa drama and is now trying to distance himself from the messier aspects of his time there. The heart rate challenge moment, based on what we saw in the extended footage, involved both of them getting carried away. But Ace is framing it like something happened to him, rather than something he participated in. That's not taking full accountability for his role in the situation. What's your read on the Huda situation? Let me know in the comments, because this feels like there's more to the story than either of them is telling. Throughout this interview, Ace repeatedly brings up his pre-Love Island accomplishments to defend against accusations that he was on the show for clout. He mentions appearances on Jennifer Hudson, Good Morning America, and various other TV shows as proof that he already had a platform.
For you to say, I came in there for clout, respectfully, you didn't know who I was. I've been on, TV shows before. I've been on Jennifer Hudson. I've been on Good Morning America. I've been on everybody's screen before, so I had all that shit. So for you to say, Ace is looking for clout.
But here's the thing, for someone who claims not to care about fame or recognition, he sure keeps detailed receipts of his media appearances. And the way he brings this up feels defensive rather than dismissive. If you truly didn't care about clout, you wouldn't need to constantly remind people of your previous achievements. Moreover, having some level of recognition before Love Island doesn't mean the show didn't significantly amplify his platform. There's a huge difference between being a social media dance instructor who occasionally appears on morning shows and being a reality TV personality with a loyal fan base and regular interview requests. The clout defense actually undermines his credibility because it shows he's very aware of the fame game and his place within it. Someone who genuinely wasn't interested in expanding their platform wouldn't feel the need to justify their pre-existing credentials. My honest assessment, Ace went on Love Island knowing it would boost his profile, just like every other contestant. The difference is that most people are honest about that motivation, while Ace is trying to have it both ways, benefiting from the exposure while claiming he was only there for love. One of Ace's biggest frustrations is how the official Love Island reunion handled his storylines. He mentions multiple times that important context was left out of conversation, that clips were edited to start mid-conversation, and that clarifications he provided weren't included in the final cut. This is where I actually have some sympathy for Ace's position. Reality TV reunions are notoriously sanitized affairs, where controversial topics get glossed over and real accountability rarely happens. The format is more about damage control than truth-telling, which serves no one. Not the cast, not the viewers, and certainly not the truth. Speedy's interview with Ace demonstrates what these conversations could look like if they weren't constrained by network politics and producer interference. The questions are direct, the follow-ups are persistent, and the format allows for nuanced exploration of complex topics. Honestly, they should just scrap the official reunion format and have an unofficial version hosted by independent creators who will ask the questions viewers actually want answered. The current system is broken and serves only to protect the show's image rather than provide genuine insight into what happened. The fact that Ace felt more comfortable and provided more honest answers in this setting than in the official reunion tells you everything you need to know about which format actually serves the audience. Looking at how Ace's post-Villa relationships have evolved reveals something interesting about how he defines loyalty. His current inner circle includes people who have publicly supported him or remained neutral, while those who haven't met his expectations for public defense have been cut out. This creates a transactional dynamic where friendship seems contingent on public relations support rather than genuine connection. It's one thing to expect friends to have your back when directly asked about you, but it's another to expect them to monitor social media narratives and proactively defend you without prompting. The Nick situation exemplifies this perfectly. By all accounts, Nick was supportive in the villa and didn't do anything to betray Ace's trust. But because he didn't meet Ace's post-show expectations for public defense, their friendship has deteriorated. That seems like a loyalty test that was never clearly communicated and potentially unfair. One of the most sobering aspects of this interview is when Ace talks about the impact of his negative portrayal on his family. He mentions that his family members received threats and harassment at work, which is completely unacceptable, regardless of anyone's feelings about his villa behavior. This highlights the dark side of reality TV fame that often gets overlooked in discussions about contestants' motivations and behavior. When you sign up for these shows, you're not just putting yourself in the public eye. You're exposing your entire family to potential harassment and scrutiny. This also explains some of Ace's defensiveness and frustration with how his story was edited. When the stakes include your family's well-being and safety, the desire to control the narrative becomes about more than just personal reputation. However, this reality makes his decision to go along with production influences even more questionable. If you know that controversial behavior will reflect on your family, why not push back harder against suggestions that might create negative storyline? The central contradiction running through this entire interview is Ace's simultaneous claims of authenticity and admissions of external influence. He wants credit for being genuine and standing on his principles, but he also wants understanding for making decisions based on producer guidance rather than his own judgment. This creates what I'm calling the authenticity paradox. You can't be both completely genuine and significantly influenced by outside forces in your decision-making. Either you maintained your authentic self throughout the experience, or you adapted your behavior based on external pressures. Both can be understandable, but they can't both be true simultaneously. But the solution isn't to claim authenticity while admitting to external influence. The more honest approach would be to acknowledge that reality TV creates an artificial environment where normal human behavior gets distorted by cameras, production pressure, and strategic considerations. Most contestants navigate this by making some compromises with production while trying to maintain their core values. The ones who succeed are usually those who are honest about this balance, rather than claiming they remained completely unchanged by the experience. This interview raises important questions about how we consume and critique reality television. If contestants are operating under production influence to create entertaining storylines, how much of their behavior reflects their actual character versus their willingness to play along with the show's needs? The traditional model of reality TV assumes that contestants are making authentic choices that viewers can judge as representations of their true selves. But interviews like this one reveal a more complex dynamic, where production pressure, strategic gameplay, and genuine emotion all interact in ways that blur the lines of authenticity. Maybe it's time for a more honest conversation about what reality TV actually is. Instead of pretending these shows offer unfiltered access to people's real personalities, we could acknowledge them as hybrid entertainment, where real people navigate artificial situations under production guidance. This doesn't mean the emotions and connections aren't genuine, but it does mean we should be more sophisticated in how we evaluate contestant behavior and assign moral responsibility for controversial decisions. After diving deep into this interview and analyzing the contradictions, revelations, and context it provides, what emerges is a more complex picture of both Ace as an individual and Love Island as a production. Ace comes across as someone who got caught between wanting to maintain his authentic self and feeling pressure to create entertaining television. His frustration with how that balance was portrayed is understandable, but his unwillingness to fully own his role in controversial decisions undermines his credibility. But the interview also shows someone dealing with real consequences from reality TV participation, including family harassment and mental health challenges. Those struggles deserve empathy, regardless of anyone's opinions about his villa behavior. The bottom line is that reality TV is more complex than most people acknowledge. And the contestants who succeed post-show are usually those who can navigate that complexity with honesty, rather than trying to maintain impossible claims about complete authenticity. Let me know in the comments what your biggest takeaway from this analysis was, and make sure you're subscribed for more deep dives into the stories that actually matter. The tea isn't going to spill itself, and someone needs to keep asking the questions that the official reunions won't touch. Until next time, keep questioning what you're being shown, because the real story is usually much more interesting than the edited version.